Hello, how are you? Welcome to Trapping the Time. My name is Pablo, and today I'm going to review this watch of Chinese origin and named the Steel Dive Cap Willard. A piece that is a cheeky copy of the mythical Seiko watch, albeit at a ridiculous price, a few cents below £85. If in the video of the Invicta Pro Diver I said that the purchase of that watch was out of curiosity and because of its magnificent price, what I didn't imagine was finding another watch just as good, just as cheap. The Invicta impacted on me so much that it took away many prejudices when judging a piece only by what you suppose it will give you for the price, and this Steel Dive is an immediate consequence of that learning. I will never underestimate a watch for its price. When I launched the challenge to find a rival for this watch, because for me it was the best cheap automatic diver, there were several friends who proposed three options, three very serious candidates. The first is the Casio Marlin, which can dispute that title of best diver without a doubt, but not the best automatic for obvious reasons, since it's a quartz watch. The second proposal was the Vostok Amphibia, and I want to say that I hope to find one because I know they are very reliable and robust like no other, and they deserve to be here in their own right. It's only a matter of time before it arrives, although now is not the best time since the Russia-Ukrainian war has caused the prices to skyrocket. And that is how we come to the third option, the one that I like the most, the one that seems to me to be the true rival for aesthetics, for quality, for materials and finishes, and also for having the same caliber. I think it's the best opponent we can find for our lightweight champion, the Invicta Pro Diver. And this other watch looks just as good, if not better. Let's take a look. First, let's talk about price. This Steel Dive cost me a little less than €100, which is about £85, but it wasn't a one-off offer. That's its normal price here in Spain, buying anything through AliExpress. But I've read in forums that the price has increased a lot recently, and I think that's more because of the veracity of the governments that sink us into taxes than because the Steel Dive has risen in price itself. In truth though, I don't know for sure, so that's why I'll ask you to leave in the comments how much this watch costs in your country, so we have more points of reference and then we're in a better position to compare it. Clarify the issue in price, but now let's go into the detail. The first thing to say that this watch is a shameless copy, not a homage, which is the euphemism we use when a watch closely resembles another we all know well, for example the Invicta Pro Diver to the Rolex Submariner. In this case, it's not that it copies some things, it's a true clone, an exact copy of the mythical Seiko 6105, better known amongst its fans as a Cap Willard, because of course, it's the watch that actor Martin Sheen wore when he played the character in that great movie, Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now. Great actor, whose real name, Ramon Estevez, by the way, is of Galician descent. The most noticeable feature of the watch is obvious. It's nothing more than that appendix. I would say that the shape of the case is so peculiar to protect the crown that they moved it from its usual place to 3 o'clock to better protect it. That was the solution they found simplest. Maybe not the most aesthetic, but enormously practical, and I've got to say, I'm loving it. Focusing on the watch, the first thing I have to say is that its general appearance is quite good, very good, surprisingly good. If you expect that it's because of it's so cheap, you're going to find some bad decisions in the quality of materials or finishes, then that definitely doesn't happen. It's actually what surprises you. It's just the opposite. There's nowhere to seriously fault this piece. If anything, I will say that this looks as good, but a little bit rougher than what we're used to. But when you look at it again carefully, you can't quite explain that either. It's possible that the enormous weight of the case has an influence, since it's a watch that case weighs a lot. The design itself can very visually induce this perception, since it is a watch with very short lugs, and it's perceived almost as wide as it is long, and that makes it heavy to look at. Having said that, The only downside I find to this piece is, of course, the hollowed link end. It is disappointing that they have poorly resolved that notorious part of the watch, and it's a shame because the rest of the bracelet is perceived in a quality that's far more decent, quite good for its price. In fact, I didn't order the silicone strap, more similar to the original watch strap, because of that recently realised desire to want more metal bracelets in my collection. But in this case, I've got to say I'm regretting that. Of course, as soon as the NATO strap that I've ordered arrives, I'll change it. Although I'm liking bracelets more and more, this piece cries out for a black NATO strap. It's a military-inspired watch. It makes perfect sense to put a strap on it that can prevent you from losing it, as it's so resistant, which is the plus that a NATO strap offers. I also think it'll look great because, although it'll make it taller, it will also be easier on the eye. I think a steel bracelet takes away from the prominence of the case, and a thinner black strap will focus the gaze on the star of the watch, which is the design, not only the case, but also all of the dial. I find it impressive how well finished it is. I would like to have got an original in hand to be able to compare them, but like this, without another reference, if instead of the Steel Dive logo it had the Seiko on it, I could be scammed. I mean, you could sneak it in, because the truth is it's very well made. It is a watch that's a tool for divers, although from its appearance, not this one, but that of the watch which it imitates. I would define it as another military watch that is a diver. The colour of the dial is matte black. The hour markers stand out quite a bit on it, with such a practical and effective design, and a very marked air of vintage watch, but at the same time totally modern, as if no more than 50 years had passed since they originally designed it. It's perceived in the clock that the main thing above all is the legibility of the time. Function before form, and of course they achieve it with that practical Japanese minimalist design. The minute markers are painted on the outermost part of the dial with thick white lines, and applied hour markers have a square shape except for the slightly larger rectangular ones at 6 and 9 o'clock. The one at 12, which is double, which does not end straight but rather pointed at 3 o'clock, is the famed date. And with a white background of black numbers, they're practically the only Arabic numerals that we can see in the dial. All the markers applied are filled with luminous paste of an acceptable quality. Not to say good, it's not the super Swiss paste, but it keeps the luminosity after several hours. The hour and minute hands are silver coloured, baton shaped, counterbalanced, and also filled with luminous paste. The second hands looks like a traffic light because of its shape and because of that red dot that helps to see it in poor light conditions. Sharing space at the tip also carries a drop of light that makes it easier to see in the dark. A design as basic as it is effective. Below 12 o'clock we see the brand's logo, and above 6 o'clock we can read automatic and water resistant 200 metres. The letters and logo in white, the numbers in red. That small detail and that tip of the second also red are the only two touches of colour on that dial that is as sober as it is effective. The chapter ring, that ring that connects the dial with the watch case, is matte black, and you hardly notice that it's wearing it. Again, functionality prevails over aesthetics, and almost without you noticing it, it frames the dial and you gaze towards the most important thing about a watch. Well, in theory, the most important thing about a watch, which is reading the time. And although I continue with the bezel, the first thing I have to say is that it's ceramic. Hard to believe for what the watch costs, but true. Its design is as vintage as the dial, narrow, and the markers alternating between the dots and bars and Arabic numerals are every 10 minutes, except for the one that would be 60, whose place is taken by a large inverted triangle. All these markers are covered in luminous paint in a bluish colour that makes a nice effect with the green colour of the luminosity of the dial. The turn of the bezel is unidirectional, and it has well-marked clicks. Its touch is rather rough, and except that it makes a lot of noise, quite a bit in fact, I can't say anything bad about it because it's fully functional. The crystal is sapphire, and it's another piece of the watch that I believe, like the bracelet, a contradiction. On the one hand, I like that the huge angle profile, it protrudes from the bezel a lot, and I would say about 1mm. On the other hand, it makes me wonder if it's a defect of the copy or like that in the original Seiko. I don't have a real Captain Willard to compare it to, so I'll be left wondering about that. If any of you have that watch in your collection, do let me know in the comments. Is this a defect of the copy, or is it an exact reproduction of the original? As I see it, it's a defect, I would say serious, because I have the impression that exposing the glass to friction and shock in this way, no matter how sapphire it is to expose yourself to damaging it or breaking it, since it's finished in almost a right angle. Well, it's not rounded. I'm afraid that makes it look very vulnerable to shock. Continuing the analysis now, it's the crown's turn. I love the design solution that Seiko found, making the watch completely asymmetrical. I love eccentric watches, and that crown at 4 with the case shape to protect it's probably the best thing ever. I don't think I have or will have a watch with a better solution for this function, since the crown is at the same height as the case, completely protected, since it embraces it as if it had grown together. Perhaps a crude solution, aesthetically debatable, although I already said that I love it, it's undoubtedly worthy of the admiration caused by a simple but effective design. The shape of the case is another of the great successes of this watch. If you see it from the front, it is an oval shape except for the appendages of the crown, but if you turn it, you see the downward angle that it gives the appearance of a tortoise shell. A great solution to reduce weight and to make the design lighter, mythical of this Seiko. And I keep saying Seiko, but it's impossible for me to talk about this watch without referring to the original. And I think that is the merit of this watch that makes you forget that yours is not the authentic one. A piece much in demand among collectors, nor of course the most recent reissue that Seiko released 2 or 3 years ago, only available to the few who could afford the more than £1,000 they were asking for it. And I fully understand that the brand wants to capitalise on that well-deserved fame that the watch has by making it more expensive versions. But that distances it from the common watch collector. They're leaving a huge market niche that the Steel Dive is now knowing how to capitalise on. Its catalogue is characterised by cloning mythical watches, previously just divers, now a little bit of everything. I wish Seiko would reissue that piece at a reasonable price, assuming the prices he's putting on his watches are reasonable. The Epson Group, owner of the brand and also of Orient, I think you know about it, have a monopoly on the Japanese automatic watches since Casio does not play in that league, and Citizen has been opting for its magnificent eco-dive systems for years. Well, as I said, it seems that the market strategy is to raise Seiko's prices and leave Orient as cheaper watches. Going back to our watch, perhaps this reality will serve as a wake-up call for Seiko. I prefer that my Captain Willard was not a Chinese imitation, but I can't pay that money on the whim of having a mythical watch in my box. Yes, I would gladly pay a price similar to that of my Samurai or Tortuga, which are no longer exactly cheap, even with the same calibre as thousands of watches in the market. That cost barely €100, such as this one. Because if this little watch had a Chinese calibre, I could hardly feel anything other than having an imitation Chinese watch in my hand. But this calibre made by Seiko and this design of this quality of materials and finishes makes me dream that I'm wearing a true Captain Willard on the wrist, and above all for less than €100. These Chinese copies, also it's easy for me to refer to the Steel Dive as an original. Some will be mad at me for even comparing a cheap Chinese copy with the famous Seiko, but I just can't help it. It costs much more with the Invicta to establish that barrier between what the watch is and what it wants to be. If we turn it over, we see that it has a screw-on lid, which is notably domed and protrudes a lot from the case. It has a polished finish, and in the centre we see the brand's logo, although what stands out most about the back is the case, is its brushings. It is a very special way of receiving the crown and protecting it. It seems to me such a solid and functional watch that only remains for me that a copy and it's not the original. That's it. But since I know that the authentic one is in reach, I don't feel a bit bad for wearing this in my box and enjoying it. I can already tell you what a phenomenal watch it is for its design and for its quality and of course for its price. Soon we will confront it face to face with its direct rival, the still champion, although they have not yet faced the epic Invicta Pro Diver. The fight promises to be tough and very disputed, because there are many rivals here, perhaps less well known but very, very powerful, and we'll soon see those on this channel. And that's all so for today's review. I hope you liked it, and if so, please like, subscribe, activate the bell, participate in the comments. Thanks very much as always for being there, and hope to see you again soon.